Hello guys, and we will continue from our previous section where we have set up our project. So now what we will do, initialize our Prisma, our ORM. So what you need in order for us to use the ORM called Prisma, if you haven't done by now, you could say add Prisma and it will add it in our package or JSON. Next thing would be we need to initialize our Prisma models or our Prisma we need to initialize our Prisma ORM. So what we need to do is we will use the CLI. So we'll use beyond Prisma init, which what it does is initialize our ORM in our current project. So what we have here is it has created a directory called Prisma, and what we have in the Prisma, we have something called schema.prisma. Another thing we have received as well, it created a .dmv file. So everything that is regarding Prisma usually will be in a directory called Prisma. So everything about Prisma ORM will be within this directory. So we'll click this schema.prisma. So unlike other ORMs, Prisma, what it does is it contains all the interactions or anything that is regarding the configuration of the database. It has its own schema defined language, while type ORM or Hibernate or other ORM or ODMs, what they do is usually it will map towards the class itself, where the language itself, where you have to add the models in the language itself, you have to add the connection within the language itself. Instead of doing that, schema decouples from the language and puts it in a specialized schema defined language. So what we need to do in order to recognize this file, you need to add a extension called Prisma, and the Prisma will highlight all the stuff regarding the Prisma defined language, similar to JavaScript or TypeScript. If you make a mistake, it will throw an error to you telling you that you have done something, so try to fix it. Or if you want to add something and you forgot how to add it, you could check out this Prisma, the syntax highlighting in their extensions. So now what we see here is two things at the moment. So the first one will be data source, and data source means the connection or anything that is regarding which type of database that you're connecting, the URL that you're connecting with the database. So you're putting all the configuration within the data source DB. So line 5 will mention which type of provider you're using, so what kind of database you're trying to connect with, and the URL of the type of provider that you're trying to connect with. So here, instead of using Postgres, what we'll be using is SQLite, and SQLite is a much more easy way of connecting or handling data in our database. It's small, minimal. It's really great for tutorial purposes, or you could say to small development when you're developing something, testing something. So what we need to do is we will change the provider to SQLite, and the URL will remove it as environment. Instead of reading from the environment variable from the .env, what we will do is we'll provide a string, and the string we'll be using is what the SQLite needs, and we are pointing towards a particular file. So SQLite will usually store in a file and that particular file we're mentioning here, it will create if it doesn't exist, and we'll call that dev.db. Now another thing, so that's for now for the data source. So the second part would be the generator client. So this is what it does. It generates function or method that we need for interacting with the database. So as I mentioned, ORM and ODM are mainly regarding to make tables into objects, and those objects needs methods in order to interact with. So this generator will provide us the methods to interact with the database, but for now we won't do it here, and we won't do anything here for our generator. The third thing that I want us to check through is we have our database, we have our generator for connecting with the interacting with the database, but what the main part of it would be in our database is tables. So how do we create tables? Unlike type ORM or any other ORM and ODMs, we tend to write it here a class and then map towards that class to a table. So instead of doing that, we will put it in our schema.prisma. That will be Prisma's way of handling classes or models. So what we'll do is we'll create a model called user. So that's how we're going to do. First, we will mention the type of feature for the what we are going to talk about, and that will be called model. And we will talk about describe the type of the table that we want to mention, and that type of table will be called user. So next thing, what we need to do, every table will have a column, or in class we have attributes. So for now, in ID, for user, we will be having an ID. And for every type of column, we'll always have a type of that type of column, or in a class, we'll have a type of the attribute of that particular class. So for example, ID will have a type of integer. So what we'll do is specify integer here. Next thing would be, we'll mention name, and name will be a type of string. And another thing is, okay, let me fix that. Okay. Alright, and then email as well, we'll create something called email, and it will be a type of string. Now we have done it here, but if you've noticed by now, we still have a problem, and the problem is regarding, for every table we always have a primary key, an index or a unique key that is for each table. So what we need to do is we specify the primary key for our table. And how do we do that is adding an annotation. So what we will do is the ID will be the special key or the special primary key for our model called user. So what we'll do is an annotation or decorative per se. And when you add an @ here, you will notice that if you're using Prisma, the Prisma extension, you will notice some IntelliSense here. And what we'll use is, in order to find that this is the primary key, we'll use something called ID. So we have defined our model now. If you notice, it looks a bit similar to what we do in our classes. We have to specify the attributes, and then we have to specify the type of the attribute, and then we have to give some information towards a particular attribute. For example, we have specified this attribute to be a primary key. Next thing we have specified is name, and we are mentioning it as a type of string. Email will be a type of string. In order for you to know what kind of types are available in Prisma, you could check out in the documentation. I'll send the link down below in the description below. So another thing, what we will do is we'll create another table, and that will be called model book. To showcase they are all similar, the way we are doing will be similar. It's easy to learn, easy to figure out how to do the Prisma and their schema defined language. So what we'll do for book, similar to what we have done in user, we'll use ID, int ID. Another thing what we'll say is we'll add the title of it, and the title will be called, it will be a type of string. Another thing we want to add will be a description of the book. So we'll write the description, and it will be a type of string. So that would be it. That's how we create models, and that's how we create models or classes in Prisma. And now the next thing is we need to put this schema or model into our database and check out if it saves this table in our database. And that will be in the next video, where we are going to talk about migration and how we are mapping the models into our database. Yeah, take care, bye.